Today we have a very interesting talk, and we're going to talk about Israeli inventions. We are going to talk about Israel as a startup nation. We are going to talk a bit about stuff that Israelis invented that has changed the world and is going to. So it's really exciting. By the way, my name is Dor, and I live in Israel. I live in Jerusalem. I'm a tour guide, and I'm also a biotechnology graduate student. And I'm doing this presentation because it's actually a talk that I give voluntarily for an elderly house. So I decided to take this presentation and upload it because I think it's really, really interesting, and some really, really nifty stuff is being done in Israel. So yeah, now do bear in mind that this presentation is rather wide. I mean, we're going to talk about computing and biology and some chemistry and agriculture and a lot of stuff. And I'm giving here a review, like a very wide perspective review of Israeli inventions. So if you're an expert in one of those fields and I say something that ticks you, then I'm sorry in advance. I'm trying to give here a wide view of Israeli inventions. So let's dive right in. First, a question. What's there in Israel that is so innovative? See here, where's my pointer? See here, that's a photo that I took from some anti-Semitic profile on Pinterest, which I found really, really funny. But even though that's really funny, the question really remains: what makes Israel such a startup nation? And I'm a tour guide, and many of my tourists asked me, God promised you, the Jews, this land, and you don't have any natural resources here. You don't have oil, you don't have gold or diamonds. Like 60% of Israel is a desert. Why is this specifically the promised land? And there is a really nice phrase in the Bible that says that God will make us, the Jews, the light for the Gentiles. So for the Gentiles. So really, I think that's in the root of the Israeli feeling that we are going to make the world a better place. So yeah, with that, let's talk about some Israeli inventions. Let's start with the innovation of Israel in the past. When we all walked in those sandals, and we were all living in the kibbutz, and where it was a simple time. So honorable mentions of really funny and interesting inventions are the petitim, also called Israeli couscous. So this is really funny because this is like this food is actually small bits of pasta in the shape of rice, or like in the shape and size of rice. And the story goes that in the 50s, Israel didn't have much money, and it couldn't import rice. So people went to the first prime minister, David Ben-Gurion, and said, what do? We don't have rice. So he said, well, you have pasta, right? Make rice out of pasta. So there you go. You have petitim. Another Israeli past invention is the well-known Uzi, the submachine gun, Uzi. that was invented in Israel. The whole army technology. I'm going to mention army technology, but I'm not going to focus on it in this presentation. Of course, the Desert Eagle that every Counter-Strike and Call of Duty player knows, and the shkedei marak, the soup almonds. The soup almonds is an Israeli original food, which is like croutons for soup, just smaller and much more tasty, way tastier. And as a kid, I used to eat soup or drink soup just for the shkedei marak, just for the soup almonds. So yeah, it was a simple time and simpler inventions. So yeah, in 1959, the staple of Israeli innovation, the drip irrigation, a water engineer named Simcha Blas and his son Isaiah Ishayahu. So Simcha Blas, he lived in a place called Hatzerim, which is it's in the desert, and they didn't have much water, and they tried to think of ways to conserve water. And Simcha noticed that if you take a pipe, right, and you make a hole in the pipe, then what you get is constant dripping of water from that pipe in a really small area. And if you plant a crop next to this hole, then the plant will get constant water, but not too much and not too little. So this this extremely simple idea of taking a hole, taking a pipe and making holes in it, he took that idea and made an invention out of it. And today, this invention, this technology called drip irrigation, is worldwide. Is worldwide, especially in arid areas where water is scarce. And so yeah, I see this thing as the really essence of Israeli innovation, almost to the point that you can call it a chutzpah. Maybe you heard of this word chutzpah. Chutzpah in Hebrew, it means like to be rude, but in a good, but like in a good way, in a good way. So yeah, so that's Israeli chutzpah. You take a pipe, you make holes in it, you make money out of this invention. So yeah, because you see, this idea of holes in pipes allows you to save a lot of water, because if you water your crops with sprinklers, then about half the water don't actually get to the plant. So with the drip irrigation, you conserve a whole lot of water, which is, well, rather obvious, right? Because if you drip the water straight to the roots, then you save a lot of water. But it turns out that the drip irrigation has plenty of other advantages that are not so trivial. For one, you can plant more crops in the same location. Say if the good fertile soil that you have is a resource, so you don't have much of it, then with drip irrigation you can get more plants for the same area. And it turns out that it turns out that with drip irrigation, crops produce more fruit and more yield. It turns out that if the water supply is constant, then the plant can focus on other stuff, and then you get more out of each plant. So yeah, that's the drip irrigation. This here in the picture is called a taftefet, or a dripper. So it's a bit more complicated than a hole in a pipe, just a bit, yeah. So what you see here, it's actually a smaller pipe that is longer, It goes around here in the perimeter, and because it's narrower and longer, then the water that drip out, they don't go like in a small stream, but really in drips. So that's really the taftefet, the dripper. So, many countries are interested in this technology, especially those with warm climate and with low amount of water, like India and California, but also China. I know that you're thinking of the rice fields, but still there are areas in China that the water supply is scarce. So this is a great place for them. And with that said, only 4% of the world watered crops, so crops that are watered worldwide, only 4% of them are watered by drip irrigation. So a whole lot of crops in Africa, for example, like in this picture, are not being watered by drip irrigation. And one reason for that is that the initial investment that you have to put in building the infrastructure for the drip irrigation, the initial investment is relatively expensive. But of course, after a very short time, you get that money back because you save it on water. But for areas with low income or without much money, then the initial investment is too high. But still, this market grows. So in 2019, the world market of dripping irrigation technology was 4.9 billion US dollars, and it's expected to double to basically double in 2025. So where's Israel's part of it? And Israel's part is the company called Netafim. Their motto is grow more with less. And this company, Netafim, was established in 1965 in cooperation with Simcha Blas, the water engineer that invented it. And today, it's a global company. It has 17 industrial factories. It employs over 4,000 employees, and it made like 900 million US dollars in 2015. And they started with the taftefet, with the drip irrigation, but today, like many other Israeli companies, you can say that they exhausted this idea, and they progressed to water. So they call it water solutions. Basically, what they do is they help you monitor and automate the many agricultural processes. Say they have drones with cameras that are able to film crops and see if there is a specific plant that doesn't get enough water or is sick or something like that. And they provide automation for agricultural processes. So yeah, that's Netafim, and that's the drip irrigation. Really, I think the single most Israeli invention. But let's move on to the next. The next one was invented in 1997. But the idea started a lot earlier. So this is a story of a guy named Gadi Idan. Gadi Idan, a professor, a doctor, sorry. And Gadi Idan was a scientist researching guided missiles in the Israeli company called Rafael. Rafael is a really worldwide company that is dealing with army technology. with firearms and fighting drones and all that jazz. Really one of the biggest companies in Israel, but because I don't want to talk about the army, then I won't talk about Rafael in this presentation. But Gadi Idan, he was a scientist in Rafael, and in 1980 he went on a sabbatical in Boston, and there in Boston, his friend had a tummy ache. And Gadi then said, well, what's the problem? I'm a specialist in cameras. I can get the camera inside you and we'll see what's wrong with your belly. And that's how he thought of the capsule endoscopy. A camera in the shape and size of a pill that you swallow, and it takes pictures of your insides, of your intestines. So he thought of it in 1980, and 18 years later, the first prototype was implemented, and 3 years later, the FDA approved of this method. So another really cool invention made in Israel. So what's so unique about this invention? Why is it such an important thing? You see, because this capsule is able to film or to image all of the intestines. And why is that important? Because you see, today, well, the intestines are divided into 3 parts. And I'm not a physician, and it's not my area of expertise. So if I pronounce it wrong, please forgive me. But there are 3 parts. There's the duodenum, there's the jejunum, and there's the ileum, this part. Now, endoscopy, where you get a camera inside your mouth and it travels down your digestive tract, is able to reach only to the duodenum. If, let's say, you have a wound here, then it can see it. The endoscopy can see it, and only till the end of the duodenum. Now, if you have a wound in the ileum, in this part, then you can go through colonoscopy that can take pictures of this area. Okay, and if you have any wound in there, then the doctors are able to see that. But the jejunum is only accessible with the endoscopic capsule. Okay, it's in Hebrew we call it the blind intestine, because no other therapy or technique is able to reach it. Okay, so we call it the blind one. And only the capsule is the only solution for that. So that's why it's so important. Now, let's take a look at this invention, right? So Dr. Idan, he established a company when he realized that this can become a product, and this technology can become a product. Then he established Given Imaging, and with Given Imaging, he produced the first prototype and the first products, and got the FDA approval and so on. And the company was sold in 2013. And today it belongs to Medtronic. Medtronic is a big pharma company that does a lot of stuff. And it was sold in 2013 for $860 million. And today Medtronic does, in Hebrew we say that does 2.7 billion US dollars a year from this invention. And this timeline gives you a sort of an idea of the whole thing that Israel is about today. So the drip irrigation was somewhat unique in the way that it still belongs to an Israeli company. But innovation in Israel works like this. You think of an idea and you make a company out of this idea. And then you sell this idea to others who can produce it. So like Dr. Idan, he thought of an idea, he made a company, and then he sold it. We call it in Hebrew, I don't know, maybe it's like the business jargon, but we call it to make an exit. So they made an exit on 2013. And it's always a conflict whether you want to make an exit for this and that amount of money, or you want to try and hold on to your invention and try to make more money out of it. So Netafim decided to hold on to the dripping technology. Given Imaging decided to sell. Let's move on to the next invention. So the next invention is the famous flash drive. You can even say the ubiquitous flash drive. You see, once upon a time, in the old days, when the old gods walked the land, there were discs, the optical discs, the compact discs, and the DVDs, and so on. And then came Dov Moran, the inventor. And he was an inventor, and he was into computers, and he built his company. And in 1995, he produced this product called Disk on a Chip. And the idea was that it's a piece of computing that is able to, it's like a computer, but on a chip. So nothing big, but rather small, like an autonomous unit that is able to perform some processes. And then 5 years later, he came up with the product called Disk on Key. Disk on Key. So in Israel, we still call it Disk on Key, even though the rest of the world knows it as a flash drive. A flash drive. Now, I'll be honest, he wasn't the first, and he wasn't the only one to invent the flash drive. And of course, the flash drive itself is a combination of other technologies. The flash technology existed since 1995, but he made it into the product that it is today. Okay, so you see this M Systems logo. That's the name of the company of Dov Moran. Okay, so he invented that in 2000, the Disk on Key, what's today called the flash drive. And 10 years later, it was such an impact on the market that 10 years later, computers began to be manufactured without an optical drive. So really, the disk on keys or the flash drives drove away the DVDs so drastically that today, 20 years later, it seems like a beautiful dream of discs. You hang them outside in the yard to make I don't know, an art project out of them. It's just it amazes me every time how this technology of flash drives just overran the market so quickly. And the reason is technology. You see, in 1997, one of the best DVDs had the memory of 4,700 megabytes and a speed of 2 megabytes per second. Now, I know that for many of you, those numbers don't say much, but that's not the idea. The idea is to compare them to the flash drive. You see, in 2000, in the year 2000, the first generation of, oh, I wrote here generation in Hebrew, please ignore that. By the way, generation in Hebrew is do. I'm also called Dor because I'm the 10th generation in Israel. So anyway, the first do of flash drives went out in the year 2000, and it had only 8 megabytes. And the speed was far lower than the DVDs. So what gives? How did they become the monster that we know and love today? You see, 2 years later, second generation came out, and the second generation also couldn't compete with the DVD's storage capacity, but on terms of speed, it was way ahead of the DVD. Okay, way ahead of any optical drive. And this thing just kept getting better and better. And in the year and 10 years ago, the third generation was announced with 128 gigabytes of storage and a speed that the DVD could really, okay, you couldn't even compare it to the DVD. And today, today in 2018, with the 3.2 generation, you can get a 2 tera memory stick with speed that is like 500 times that of a DVD. You just move gigabytes, a gigabyte per second. So yeah. So the basis of this technology, that is today a 2 terabyte memory stick that is able to transfer 1 giga per second, the basis for this technology was invented here in Israel. So how come this invention is not as known to be Israeli? Well, the reason is that Moran had a really rough competition. You see, he established his company M Systems in 1989, and as we said at the year 2000, he announced the Discon Key, the first flash drive. But he wasn't alone. He had competitions, and other companies were competing with him to try and develop their own flash drives based on his. So in 2001, his company made $45 million, and for a company whose 2 products came out just like a year and 5 years prior, I think that's really interesting. But the big thing, you see, in 2001, the revenues were $45 million, but 5 years down the line, Moran's company made $1 billion a year, yearly. All right, just think of this jump. But eventually, he couldn't compete with SanDisk, and in the same year, M Systems were bought by SanDisk for $1.5 billion. Now, $1.5 billion sounds like much, but remember, the revenues for this company in 2006 were $1 billion. So yeah, and 10 years down the line, SanDisk is bought by Western Digital for $19 billion. And today Western Digital earns $16 billion. So yeah, it's always a conflict whether to sell your company or to keep it. So yeah, so that's the Israeli flash drive, invented in Israel, and today really ubiquitous in the whole world. By the way, I didn't include it in this presentation because it's really not my area of expertise, but the flash drive technology was it developed into what's called today the MMC, the storage chip that is being used on virtually every phone. So yeah, if you have a phone, a smartphone, then you can say thanks to Israel. With that, let's move on to Israel in the present, best well known for Gadot, but little less known for its amazing technology, like Wix, the site building service, or Waze. Do you know about Waze? Some Americans that I talked to know about Waze. It's the navigation app that allows you it computes different routes if you have any traffic jams in your normal route. So now you say, well, sure, my Google Drive can do that. And I'll tell you, yeah, because Waze was bought by Google and incorporated Waze technology into Google Drive. So into Google Maps, sorry, not Google Drive, Google Maps. So if next time when you use Google Maps, it tells you, well, there's a traffic jam in your normal route, take this route, say thanks to Israel. And the Iron Dome, one of the things that Israel is certainly most famous for, the short-range anti-missile missiles technology. This technology is amazing. It's able to detect pieces of metal flying into civilian areas and mid-air and shoot a rocket that would explode, that would shatter those pieces of metal into smithereens, causing no harm. So the Iron Dome is really one of the staple Israeli technologies. It's an amazing piece of work, and you should really look into it because it's really amazing. And the lovely Ada Yonat, it's not she didn't make a company, but she's a scientist, a biologist, and she's the one to what's the term? Not decipher. To elucidate the ribosome's structure. The ribosome is a very basic unit in a cellular cell, present in virtually every cell on Earth, and she is the one to discover the structure of the ribosome, and for that she got a Nobel Prize. We have another Nobel Prize, Dan Shechtman, who discovered the quasi-crystals, and I didn't include him in this presentation because I'm a biologist. I know about Ada Yonat and what she did, not too much about Shechtman. So let's talk about Mobiline. Mobiline is today the crown jewel of Israeli companies. So Mobiline does the original products of Mobiline were driver assistant systems. It's those systems in your car that when you get too close to another car, it beeps. Or if you steer from one lane to another, it beeps. And in some states, it can even steer your steering wheel in a case that it recognizes that you're about to crash into something. So that's Mobiline. It was established by Professor Amnon Shashua and Ziv Aviram from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. That's the place where I do my master's degree. And yeah, the Israel is proud of the Hebrew University for this invention. You see, because Mobiline is not based on on radars or that are based on radio waves, or LADAs that are based on laser waves. This technology implements a camera, and then the computer, which analyzes the pictures coming from the camera and is able to recognize what part of the picture is the car, what the car in front of you, what part of the picture is the road, what part of the picture is the sky, and so on. So it sees other vehicles. So at first it was just a driver assistant systems. That was in 2007. But then they started to crank out other assistant and recognition technologies. So a year later, they were able to recognize lanes and traffic signs. It could tell you if you're driving too fast according to the local traffic signs, and it was able to raise to raise its abilities to alert you if the car driving towards you had high lights. Next, a year later, it was able to recognize pedestrians and bikes and commuters. And since then, it got less into the driver assistance systems and warning technologies and more into autonomous driving. And today, in 2020, in a cooperation with Intel and IBM, they have self-driving cars. So that's really, really nifty, and let's see it in action. Basically, you can watch on YouTube. I took this movie from YouTube, so you can just search on YouTube Mobiline demonstration 2020, and you'll see this marvel. So this here is a camera from a drone that escorts the car. This is a camera inside the car, and you can see how he fastened the seat belts and put on the glasses, the sunglasses, very important, and how he doesn't touch well, first it's inactive, but once it starts driving, then he doesn't touch the wheel. And here, this is the really interesting part, because here you can see what the car sees, right? This car has no radars and has no lidars. It has only cameras. It has 12 cameras on it all around. And from those 12 cameras, it is able to produce a 3D model of its surroundings. Okay, and here you can see what the car sees. Okay, so it sees this car and this car, so it's this car and that car, and this car now turns red, and so on. And that's in Jerusalem, in the high-tech area of Jerusalem. So I think that's just amazing. I'm watching it and I'm so proud. This is Israeli tech. So let's take a moment, one more moment, to appreciate what we're seeing, and then we'll move on. Now, of course, it's a demonstration, so they try to look at the bright sides and to showcase their technology. But if you think about it, a camera-only car cannot operate on nighttime, or well, in fog and rain, then it's always a problem. But I think that the camera will have easier time with rain than a ladder-based technology. But still, I guess that if you combine those technologies into like a unified car, then you get the most out of lidars and ladders and cameras. But still, it's impressive nonetheless. So let's take a look at Mobiline. So it was established in 1999, right? 2006, it had the first product, the one that beeps and shrills when you get too close to another car. 2015, when they really completed the whole suit for the car, then Tesla approached them and suggested cooperation, and they agreed. And Tesla implemented the autopilot feature, which was an early version of the autonomous car. If I get it right, then it was especially made for the highways, where the driving is easier because the roads are more predictable. But then what happened was that they had a fatal accident. One of the cars equipped with Mobiline technology, Tesla cars, crashed into a crossing trailer. And if I get it right, what happened was that the computer thought that the trailer was so big that the computer thought that it goes into a tunnel, and so it didn't break. So yeah, so with that accident, Tesla decided to pull out of this agreement, and a year later, Mobileye decided to go for other companies. So, and it decided to work with Intel and IBM. In the same year, Intel purchased Mobileye, made an exit. That's how we call it. And it was bought by Intel for 15 billion US dollars. I think it's the biggest purchase in Israel history, but I'm not sure. Certainly one of the top 5, certainly. But yeah, so that's Mobiline. Today, everyone just understand that at the time, at 2017, Mobiline had like 50, maybe 50 employees. It's crazy. It's really crazy. We're not talking about a worldwide company that is bought for 15 billion US dollars. We're talking about a small company established less than 20 years prior in the Hebrew University. They worked in a small building with like a bunch of offices, and the fact that it was purchased like that, it's just amazing. So with that, let's move on to a whole other area, BioBee. So BioBee is far less known than the other companies that we've talked about. It's not as big, and it's not as well known, partly because it's a private company. It's a private company. They don't have to report about their revenues and so on. So I don't know how much they earn yearly. Now, what they do is biological pest control. You see, because when you think of pest control, you think about small planes spraying chemicals, right? But BioBee is doing something else. It is a company that is located in a kibbutz. Don't know if you heard about the kibbutz, this communal village where everyone is equal, and it's a really special way of life that is unique to Israel. And what they do, let's imagine that you have a problem of fruit flies. It's a kind of a fly that really destroys crops. So what BioBee developed is barren male fruit flies. You see, because the fruit fly is able to mate only once in its life, the female. And what their idea was that if you take a greenhouse and you fill it with barren male fruit flies, then they will compete with the regular male fruit flies, and they will be able to overrun the population, and they will mate with the females, will not have children, and then the females will die, and you will get rid of the fruit flies in a biological way. So that was their first product, but by far the most successful product is the spiders. You see, because there's a kind of pest that is called spider pest. Spider pest. It's really, really teeny tiny. It's like a millimeter long, and it's one of the woes of gardeners worldwide. And BioBee discovered a kind of a spider that chases those spider mites and eats them. They're they're roughly the same size, the spider and the spider mite, but the spiders are the predators, and they chase the spider mites, and they are able to get rid of them. And the spiders themselves are not harmful for the crops. So today, and that's what BioBee does. Researches organisms to fight pests, to fight other organisms that are considered pests. And yeah, so those spiders, I don't know how much BioBee earn, what are the revenues, but 1 gram of those spiders is like 6 times, almost 6 times, 5 times the cost of gold, right? The worth of gold. So we don't know how much exactly they earn, but it is known that they had big deals with Colombia and with Russia, sending to those countries hundreds of millions of spiders. That's how it looks like. That's how it looks like. They send like a bottle or a box this big, right? And you just open the box and the pests are gone. Which is, I think, really cool. By the way, the drawings here of bees, that's because, yeah, BioBee also researches bees, and they try to fight the beehive collapse syndrome and so on. So yeah, they have upcoming deals with other countries, especially in South America. And yeah, so really one of the more interesting and less known areas of expertise of Israel, because it's a private company and they um, try to stay under the radar, then it's not as well known as other things. But they are making a change. They are making a change, especially in Africa. They are making a lot of change because in Africa they tend to grow very good crops. But the thing is, they use the cheaper pesticides, which are chemical pesticides. And then the UN doesn't allow for those chemical pesticides. So in Africa, they can't export to Europe. So to cheapen those services enough so they can use biological pesticides in Africa to export to Europe. So yeah, Israel is making a change. Now, an interesting thing to look upon is those boxes. You won't see the Israeli flag on those boxes. Even if you look very closely, you won't see made in Israel. And why? Because well, Israel's reputation is not great. And even though Israel is responsible for so many inventions that changed the world, then people are not always happy to see Israeli products. So many Israeli products are being sold, but on different names. It's not uncommon to see the name of one company in Israel, and then another company in Europe, just because they don't want Europeans to realize that it's coming from Israel. So it's a bit of a shame, but it's politics, and I try not to get into politics. So yeah, let's move on. Yeah, if we're talking about changing the world, let's talk about Israeli medicine, especially two. One of them is Azilect, a medicine for to treat Parkinson's disorder. It won't stop. It won't reverse the disorder, but it will hopefully halt it or slow it down. So it was approved in 2006, but the beginning of the research, it was research from 1996, just to understand how long those things take. So it was developed by Professor Musa Yodim in the Technion, one of Israel's leading scientific institutes. And so I put those two numbers here just to understand a bit, just a glance on the medical field. You see, in 2016, by the way, the medicine was bought by the Israeli company called Teva. Yudim still receives royalties for it, but Teva earned $400 million US dollars in 2016, but in 2017 it earned less than half of it. What happened? What happened is that the patent for this medicine wore off. And in 2016, other companies managed to, in 2016, other companies got the ability to mimic Azilect. It's called generic drugs. Once the patent wears off, then you can mimic the drug, and then from being the only supplier of Azilect, then Teva had to start competing. And it's interesting to see the competition in those two numbers. You can see them also in Copaxone, the very popular medicine for multiple sclerosis, developed in Weizmann Institute. And the development began in the 70s, and the medicine itself was approved in 1997. And the same, you can see the same here. In 2016, Teva earned 4.2 billion US dollars a year, and in 2018 it earned less than a quarter. So yeah, Israel is also making medicine, and it's always fascinating to look at this field of medicine and the different aspects that rule it and so on. Yes. So with that overview of Israel's present, let's move on to the future. So I'm going to talk about two companies from the biotech industry, because that's what I know of. But there's plenty of stuff going in Israel. Really, Israel is called the startup nation for a reason. So many startups. BrainQ, which is working on recovering nerve cells. Plant, which managed to produce human collagen. So like no, wait, let me rephrase. They managed to produce collagen in tobacco leaves. So like the human cells, the human collagen, that the human body doesn't, no, not forcing it out. What's the word? throw it out. Let's say throw it out. And with the collagen recognized by the body, then you can do crazy stuff. They showed us like this demonstration video of a wound, right? An open wound, a bleeding wound. They smear some of the collagen on that wound, and it closes just like that. Or you can inject it into tendons to heal them. And Aleph farms, which produce lab-grown meat. That's a real big issue today in Israel, lab-grown meat. And what their vision is that when we go to Mars, then we'll have those quote unquote farms that would produce lab or plant-grown meat. So yeah, it's really the future, I think. So another futuristic company is Civex. Civex produces spider silk. You see, when spiders build the web, they have a few kinds of fibers. And one kind, the one that holds the whole net together, is called the drag line. Okay, those. And those drag lines are crazy strong, crazy strong. It's been calculated that if you had a fiber, a cable from this drag line, pencil wide, all right, like less than an inch wide, then you could use it to stop an airplane, a Boeing, mid-flight. So this is really the holy grail of compound industry, material industries. Just to understand, when you compare compounds, materials, right? You have few parameters. So steel, for example, has really great strength. So if you pull it, you'll need a whole lot of force to. You need a lot of stress to tear it. All right. Kevlar, on the other hand, you need a lot of force to tear it, and you need a whole lot of force to puncture it, and it's much lighter than steel. But spider silk has can reach the same strength as steel, but the toughness, meaning that the amount of effort that you'll need to produce to puncture it is so much stronger than steel, and it's so lighter than steel. Then it's really a promising avenue. And a guy named Shmulik Itach, an Israeli, managed to produce spider silk. Now, to understand, spider silk served as the those are goats, right? Not spiders. Sorry. Spider silk served as the holy grail of material industry. Biotech companies tried to produce it since the 80s. Take Nexia, the company called Nexia, who took those cute goats and said, wait a minute, we know what are the genes, the biological genes in the spider responsible for creating the spider silk. Let's take the goats and bioengineer their titties to produce the spider silk along with the milk. And believe it or not, it worked. In 2002, they showed how they can take the milk of those goats, filter it up, and you get the monomers of the spider silk. But the thing is, it was only the monomers. No one knows how to weave those monomers into fibers. Okay, so they get only the monomers, the protein in the monomeric form, but no one knows how to make it into a fiber. An attempt was made later on in 2010 to synthesize to produce this protein in bacteria, and again they got the monomers, but they didn't understand. This attempt couldn't get it to work like in a fiber, and so it didn't get the same properties as the spider silk fiber. Again with silkworms, which is funny because they took those silkworms and they basically reprogrammed them to produce spider silk instead of the regular silk, but it didn't work. And only Shmulik Itach managed to produce spider silk in the polymeric form in insect cells. And 4 years down the line, he publishes the first product. So what exactly does he do? What exactly does he do? Yeah. So admittedly, Civex and Shmulik Itach don't manage to. They didn't get to the point where they can produce the spider silk in a fiber form. Like you don't get a cable, that pencil wide cable yet. What they do have is those polymers, but in a really tiny scale. What you can do with this thing is you can mix it with plastic or with other materials to enhance their strength. Okay, you take plastic, you mix it 1% over 99% with the spider silk, with those nanofibers, and you get plastic that is like 4 times stronger. So their first product was this balloon, medical balloon, used in surgeries. Okay, and because it was infused with spider silk fibers, it was like 4 times stronger and less susceptible to tear than the traditional one. And because it was so much stronger, then you could make it not lighter, but thinner, and still save the not being afraid of tearing. And that's what they do. They take other materials. Imagine a sports shoe. You take the sole of this shoe, and you infuse it with spider silk. You get a sole that would never wear down, but would be even lighter than the usual. Aerodynamics, same. Those fibers are able to stand crazy environments. So aerodynamics is one of them. It's one of the areas that they go into. Pharmaceuticals. So we had that balloon, but I don't know how to call it in English. But let's say you have an open wound, right? And the doctor comes and he sew your wound together with a string, right? Imagine if you could make the same string more powerful and thinner, then that would hurt your skin much less. So that's what they do. They infuse those surgical strings or surgical cables with the spider silk, and they get thinner and stronger strings. And one last thing, it turns out that, well, some would say that infusing those balloons with like spider protein would be bad. The body, our body would would resist this spider protein. But it turns out that those proteins in the monomeric form or in the polymeric form, they serve as scaffolding for the skin to heal. So they are not only elevating the strength of this material, they are also body friendly. So the body can rely on those proteins to heal. So with that in mind, they are going into cosmetics. So if you can make a cream with that spider silk and let your body heal, leaning on those proteins, that can be great. So yeah, that's Civex. Really going sci-fi here, like producing spider silk to enhance your running shoes. And let's get to the craziest, most sci-fi company. And this is, look at the year, it's 2019. It's completely new. And so they don't have yet a product, but they have a promise, they have a vision. What they deal with, Matriself, is 3D tissue printing. Okay, which tissue? We'll see in a second. But the guy who runs this company, Matriself, his name is Professor Talbot, and he got really famous a year ago because he managed to produce a human heart. Okay, and then and not just any human heart, but he gave this human heart static shock, and it started pounding. Just look at it. Take a look. Tell me if it's not 100% sci-fi. I think it's nuts. Now, what do you do with the heart? So the interesting thing is that it's not just made out of plastic. What they do in Matriself, they take tissue from a sick person, and they print the heart based on cells from that tissue. So every heart is specific to a patient. And let's say that you have some condition, and the doctors are debating whether to give you this medicine or that medicine. Both are treating your condition, your heart condition, but they're not sure which would perform better. So imagine if you could print a heart of your own tissue and test your medicine and test the medicines on that model heart, and then use the result to give you the exact medicine. So that's one prospect. Another prospect that is really interesting is and that's what they are doing currently, is to hasten up preclinical studies. You see, when you have a medicine, when you develop a medicine, then you first have to show that it's not toxic to cells, and then not toxic to model animals, and at least 2 model animals, and then you can go to clinical studies. What Matriself is hoping is to convince the FDA that their model hearts can serve as a model animal. And then because you don't need to wait 2 years for the mouse to see what happens with it, they can hasten up preclinical studies and then make other medicines be approved or rejected faster. So that's what they're doing currently. But if they're able to produce a heart, then they could produce other limbs and other organs. And what they expect, their vision, is in 4 years to start implementing motor implants and start treating paralyzed people, making people walk again. So yeah, so I think it's really sci-fi. So what's the secret of Israel? You know, you look at it from outside, it looks like this old, very beautiful city and nation. Um, how can such old cities and new R&D facilities be built side by side? Like that's Jerusalem and Nazareth, where Jesus was born. Um, and in Nazareth, that's the Church of the Annunciation. In Nazareth, Microsoft built one of their biggest R&D facilities, like the Dead Sea, and Google in Arad or in Jerusalem, Intel in Kiryat Gat, uh, and I think that's the secret. Merging the past and the future together, um, and merging really so many cultures and so many ideas, then that would lead you to the best ideas. I think that's the secret, but that's my answer for it. And I would love to hear your answers about what makes Israel so special. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and yeah, tell me what you like to hear me telling next. Have a wonderful time and stay safe and healthy.